Christmas is a confusing holiday. And we all know it because you'll go to Spotify, you'll turn on the radio, and you'll hear, "Joy to the world, the Lord is come," right? "Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room," right? Those words are specifically, Jesus is King, make room in your hearts. Right? You can't share that, openly today without being judged. But that's what you hear on the radio. And so for you as a Christian, you hear that and you're like, "Oh, I love this Christmas season. It's all about my Lord Jesus," right? But then right after that, you'll hear Mariah Carey sing, "All I want for Christmas is you." And you get confused, right? And you think, "Oh, that's right. All I want for Christmas is that boy, that girl, that," That's what you think of. And then you think about the present, you think about the light, and slowly, it starts to not become about Jesus. And the whole idea of Advent, the church has done that for centuries because we want to understand the miracle that is Christ, who is God, became flesh. And for us in this season, not to get caught up in all of that's out there. It's not necessarily bad, but it is bad if it ends up not being about Jesus. And that's what we want Christmas to be about Jesus. So open up your Bibles to John 1. John 1, we'll be reading John 1 to 13 today. And John, as I mentioned, is an apostle. He was a disciple of Jesus, considered the beloved of God, the beloved of Jesus. So he knew him. He was in the inner circle. And his gospel, the point of his gospel is written so that people would believe. That's why he wrote it, so that people would believe. But not just from not believing to believing, not just that, yes, primarily that, but it's also so that those who do believe, their faith is deepened and strengthened. And that's our hope for us today, that your faith is deepened and strengthened, or that you actually come to believe today. And that's the hope of John, and even as we go through Christmas with John, what we hope for you as well. So let's read John 1, verse 1. "In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." And we'll pause there. The first lesson that we'll be going through today is that this world is a dark place. So tell your neighbor, this world is a dark place. It's a dark, dark place. John doesn't begin his gospel with the beginning of Jesus' ministry. He doesn't begin his gospel with the beginning of Jesus' life. He doesn't begin the gospel with a story of Jesus' lineage. He goes back to the earliest possible, not even creation, from the beginning, whatever that means. He goes from the beginning. And as he wants people to understand who Jesus is, he goes back as far as possible. In the beginning was the Word. The Word, if you know Genesis 1, shows power. By his Word, he created the world. It shows power. But also the Word is his self-expression, as we heard last week. It's like as I talk right now, I'm using words. As you talk to others, you're using words. That's how you build relationship. This idea of Word is God's self-expression. He's got the power to create through his Word, but it is his Word that's revealed. What it's saying is he's making a relationship with man. He's trying to connect with us through the Word. That this God created us to have relationship. That's what it's telling us. That's what he wants us to say. In the beginning was the Word was with God. So we understand this Word, who is Jesus, this Word was with God. So we understand, okay, this Jesus, he's with God. So everyone's tracking in the beginning, okay, he was the Word, he's powerful, he's relational. He was with God. Okay, great, Jesus is with God. The Word was God. For them, when they first heard it, their minds would have been blown, right? They would have been thinking, "Oh, what? Jesus, the man that we saw, that Jesus was with God from the beginning?" That's what he's trying to say. See, he is not God the Father, but he is God, God the Son. And what he's doing here is helping us understand this deity of God, the deity of Jesus. He wants us to understand. We don't first come to know Jesus as he's a man. The greater miracle is not a man becoming God, it's God becoming man. That's the great miracle, and that's what he wants us to see. He is God, he is deity, and he becomes man. So he was with God, he was God. Verse 2, he was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. As Dennis mentioned last week so well, this language is interesting because he's trying very hard to communicate something very clearly. If you're an English teacher and your student writes something like this, you would fail him because you're like, it's unnecessary. You've already proven your point. But he wants to make that clear. What he's saying is everything was made, right? This world, the universe, the stars, everything was made by Jesus. So again, these Jewish minds are thinking, what? Really? These Gentile minds are thinking, what? Jesus created? He created the world. He's the one with that kind of power. We crucified him. That Jesus? He's saying, yes, that Jesus. And he says, it's this Jesus that creates. It's this Jesus that has relationship. And it's this Jesus that he has created everything. So again, their minds are blown. What basically in this, what you see is the doctrine of not just the deity of Christ, the humanity of Christ. What you also see is the Trinity. You can't have the Trinity apart from Jesus' deity and his humanity. It's all a part of this puzzle that is God in one sense. That's what we see here. He was with God and he was God. That's how you start a gospel, right? In those verses, you can preach days. But we're moving on, because that was last week. So this is this week. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Verse 4, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. What he wants us to know after we understand his deity and how he became flesh, what he wants us to know is why he became flesh. To be light. In him was life, and that life was light. That's what he wants us to know. He wants us to know, apart from him, this world is dark. Apart from him, our hearts are dark. That's what he wants us to see. And that's what I want you to walk away with. Today, we won't end there, but I do want to begin there. This world is a depressing place. It's a sad place. It's a dark place. It's a broken place. We all can think of a night when we were broken. Can't we all? Every single one of us. There was a time in our lives when we were miserable. We had no hope for the future. All of us, guaranteed, we've gone through that. Every person here, that's the reality. Not only do we see this internally, in the past we see it today. With our frustrations, with our loneliness, with our broken hope, our feelings of despair. We see it on a macro level, the depression of so many people, the poverty, the homelessness, modern day trafficking that exists today, over 40 million, should bother you. Because it's lives, people's lives. They don't have freedom, they don't have choice. Things that God gave to us as being made in the image of God. The refugee situation, that should break your hearts when you see those pictures, when you hear those stories. The violence, the school shootings, the injustice, the racism, the hate, the lack of love, the ignorance. It's everywhere. And that's what he wants us to see. This world is a dark, dark place. We see it in our families, with how our parents may have treated us, how you may have seen your parents treat each other, how there may have been some sort of abuse, physical, emotional, maybe even sexual. The most darkest things many of us have seen firsthand It's this world. It is very, very dark. But the good thing is that even apart from Jesus, there's this something called common grace that he pours upon all people, and there's a little bit of good intention. We see NGOs, right? We see nonprofit organizations creating different organizations to help those in need. You see many people volunteer. You see people raising funds for other people. It's beautiful. It moves our hearts. Even in politics, I would say, for a lot of people, they do have good intentions. I know it may be very hard to see, but a lot of them start off with good intentions. They genuinely want to help people. What we don't see here, what the problem is not necessarily desire. It is to a certain degree, but it is something that we should affirm, that we should seek good. Christian and non, we should all seek good. But the problem is not just desire, it's multifaceted. It's so complex that since the beginning of time, there was always darkness. Ever since Genesis 3, there was always some sort of darkness. Even with 3 people or 4 people, there was darkness ever since sin came in. It's just how the world it's the consequences of sin. We see this everywhere. This past week, I listened to an interview by Michelle Obama as her book had just come out. And she shares about the challenges of her years in the White House. And as she shares about that, she shares about how at the moment when they were finishing up their term, she just broke down because there was this release in her. As she shares about that, she also shares about her marriage and how she wanted every time for her husband, when he would come home, he wanted him to have a safe place to talk about policies, different things that's on his mind, and for her not to be the first one to be like, no, do it this way, don't do it that way. Like she just wanted to be a sounding board for him to be able to bounce off ideas. And as she talks about this, the reason she does that is because everyone else in the world has an opinion. That's why she does it. She does it because CEOs and different politicians, they come and they all have an opinion. They all want to coach the president, right? This commander-in-chief. They all want to tell him how to do their job. Everyone has some sort of desire to help. I'm sure for many of them, it's good intentioned. But you realize it's multifaceted. There's a reason the world is the way that it is. And she goes on in that interview to say, you wouldn't tell your dentist what to do. It's not like you would go to your dentist and be like, no, dentist, I think you should drill this way. You wouldn't tell your dentist that, right? But for some reason, with other spheres of life, we think we know. And what John is saying is, you don't really. You don't really. I would say Republicans are in many ways right. Democrats are in many ways right. I don't think one camp or another has it all, or whichever way that you see politics. And what John is trying to say is we're all in darkness, and we have to be able to see that. And basically throughout the book of John, he highlights that. Even in his letter in 1 John chapter 2, this is exactly what he says about light and darkness. Verse 10, whoever loves his brother abides in the light, and in him there's no cause for stumbling. Whoever hates his brother is in the darkness and walks in the darkness and does not know where he is going because the darkness has blinded his eyes. What it's saying here is that the hatred that we have is a form of darkness. It's because we live in darkness. But not only that, what he's also saying is not only are our hearts dark, that we have this hatred, this evil, but he also says our eyes are dark. I think what it's saying is we don't see truly. We don't have all wisdom. We think we know. And the picture of this is, imagine all of us. There's no lights anywhere. We have no idea where we're going. But all of us say, no, it's this way. No, it's this way. No, it's this way. But no one knows. That's the image. We live in darkness. We're blind. It's a blind leading the blind. But it's not just a blind leading the blind. It's a blind leading the blind in darkness. That's the picture. And then Romans 1:21 even talks about our hearts. For although they knew God, they did not honor him or give thanks to him, but became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. It's saying The world is dark, your eyes, you're blind, and your heart is dark. And so when it says Jesus is the light, it means something because everything else is dark. The idea of Jesus being light only means something to you when you realize how dark the world actually is. You see, I mentioned desire before. The problem is not how much heart you have. The problem is the heart itself. That is the problem. It's a heart condition. It's also a mind condition. It's also a sight condition. It's also the condition of this world. And we're all trying to figure it out. We all think we know something. So one party is telling another party, this is how it should be. But no one knows. No one really knows. I think a lot of people are right in a lot of ways, but no one really knows. And the more you put your hope in that system, what do you see? Only more hatred, only more anger, only more bitterness. It's only darkness getting darker. That's the image. The world is a dark, dark place. Isaiah 8:21 says this about the light that's coming, but before that, it talks about darkness. They will pass through the land greatly distressed and hungry. And when they are hungry, they will be enraged, and will speak contemptuously against their king and their God, and their faces and turn their faces upward. So they're thinking about God, they're angry at God. So the next thing they do after they lose hope in God, they look for hope on earth. So in verse 22, and they will look to the earth. It's this idea of looking for hope, looking for something, but behold, distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish, and they will be thrust into thick darkness. What this is saying is we cannot provide the light. We can talk about it, we can discuss it, we can strategize, we can fundraise for it, but we cannot provide the light. This world is a dark place, and you will only appreciate light when you realize how dark it really is, right? In the story of the soccer players, the soccer kids in Thailand that were trapped in the cave, they had no light in there. So for days they were without light. And so when they saw light for the first time, what happens? Hope. What's that light represent? It represents life. You appreciate light when you realize how dark it is. When we have power outages, we appreciate light. But I think today, even just a couple of weeks ago, when KT went down, you appreciate the internet, electricity, when you don't have the internet, right? That's what it's saying. You will appreciate light when you realize how dark it is. The world is a dark place. And so because the world is a dark place, we need someone to shed light on the situation. Pun completely intended. We need someone to shed light literally on this situation. We do. That's exactly what we need. And we see that in Jesus, that Jesus is the light. So tell your neighbor, Jesus is the light. Jesus is the light. He is the light. And I hope you walk away today understanding the reality, the miracle that it is that Jesus is genuinely the only true source of light. I'm going to jump to verse 9. The true light which gives light to everyone was coming into the world. And he was in the world, and the world was made through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but by the will of God. What it wants to show us is that Jesus is the light. He is the true light. He has come down. And we, you and I, we have the choice to choose to receive that light. And as we choose to receive that light, what happens are several things. What happens when you see light? What happens when you receive light? A few things. One, light changes desires. Light changes desires. You see this in verse 5. The light shines in the darkness has not overcome it. It talks about light and darkness, not in a literal way in this situation, but I think in a very moral way. A light is good, darkness is bad, and it's like this. It's like these two are at odds with each other. What happens, what it's showing, is that darkness is not simply the absence of light. It's not the darkness is not just simply absence of good. It's evil. It's actually very much opposed to light, to what's good. John 3:19, shortly after the famous verse of God so loved the world, it says, "And in this is a judgment. The light has come into the world," Jesus has come into the world, "and the people," what? "Loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil." That's what darkness does. That's what darkness is. It's evil. And what it's saying is when light comes in, it actually changes your heart. It actually changes your desires. And we know this in a very physical way. This past week I was reading about Alaska and Seattle and Vancouver and most of Canada, right? Where in that part of the earth, there's less sunlight in the winter, right? It's a very short period of time. So the government in many of these cities, the government actually has regiments, has these different policies so that people drink less alcohol. They drink less alcohol during that time. They encourage exercise. They encourage healthy food. They encourage all these different ways in which so that you don't get depressed, so that you don't actually get sad. What happens to us here? So we don't have that problem, but we have something else much worse. Air pollution. Right? It's horrible. And then the past few weeks, for those of you who are new to Korea, you've seen that. It's miserable. Everything is hazy. It's not fog. It's not clouds. It's microdust. What is microdust? It's of the devil, see? But it's this haze. You see it. And everyone's kind of miserable for a few days. No one's happy. But what happens when the breeze finally pushes the air past, and you see the sun, and you see the blue sky? Everyone's a little bit happier, right? Everyone's a little bit happier. It changes desire. It changes your emotion. It changes the very contents of your heart. That's what it does. What happens when you don't have light in your life, literally, you actually go into depression. What happens on an emotional, spiritual level? Spiritual depression. This decay, this longing that's never satisfied. Light changes desires. Light gives revelation. Light gives revelation. This verse is not up here, but let me read it first. Luke 2:32. A light for the Gentiles, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and for the glory to your people Israel. That's what Jesus is. He reveals. He helps you see what you couldn't see before. What do you do at night when you go home? What's the first thing that you do? Turn on the light, right? Ever try to walk to the bathroom in the middle of the night and walk back, and at some point you stub your toe? Right? What's happening? No revelation, right? You cannot see, and so you stumble. You stub your toe, and we do that in life. We stub our toes in life and we get angry. That's what happens without revelation. We think we know. We try to figure it out. I'm going to do this for this season. I'm going to do that for that season. It doesn't work out. You emotionally stub your toe. That's what happens when you don't have revelation. That's why Jesus is the light. He lights the path. He leads you to greener pastures. That's the way in which it's supposed to work. That's what the whole Levitical system was. As you genuinely love one another and care for one another, the actual economy is actually supposed to flourish. That's the whole idea. That's why you actually do business if you don't know. It's a part of our creation mandate. Everything that we do, if it's in God's way, it's supposed to give life. Light gives revelation, and lastly, light gives life. As I just mentioned, light gives life. He is the one and true only fount of life and light. Everything else that we see is a mere creation of God who is light, who is life. So when you hear about the sun and how it has this expiration date for it to implode? I don't know science. I'm not Dennis. But when you see that, the idea is that there is only one source of light. It is God himself. What happens when you don't see light? As I mentioned, depression. When we had Kara, our firstborn, she was jaundiced, meaning she had like this yellow skin. And so I thought, that's interesting. I knew that we're yellow as people, but man, she's really yellow. And so the doctors take her, put her in this bin, and put a lamp on her. I'm like, she's not a plant, dude. Like I know you're a doctor, but that's what they do. It's so that your skin receives light. It gives vitamin D. It literally gives life. Like photosynthesis, right? What it does is for that plant, it gives that plant life. That's what it needs. For us, that's what it does. It gives us life. Jesus genuinely gives us life. Martin Luther King, this is what he says. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. What it's saying is this. You don't turn off darkness. You turn on the light and the darkness is gone. What it's also saying is death. You don't kill death. You only can give something life to end death. Hatred. You don't stop hating. If you hate somebody and you just distract your mind, the act of not hating, being neutral, is still a form of not loving. It's still a form of not loving. Think about it. Those that you see, maybe you see somebody fighting. You see a girl getting beat up, and you see, interesting. Walk away. Is that a form of some sort of evil? Absolutely. Is it hatred? It's not hatred, but it's definitely not loving. But the world in which we live, yes, hate is a huge part. But I think the greatest sin is just not loving. Whatever happens to you, happens to you. It's my life, I'll do whatever I want. It's been there since the beginning of time. Hate cannot drive out hate. Neutral cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And that's what happens with Christ. He gives you life. It's a new heart, right? Other religions will call it some sort of spiritual awakening. But no, God doesn't call it that. It's a rebirth. It's not just changing your desire. It's a new desire because you have a new heart. You're a new creation because the Holy Spirit has come into you, and now you have life. You have new desires. You want to worship the Lord. You want to live for God. You want to love others. That's what a Christian is. You're not doing the right thing. You're loving. And that's what a Christian is. That's what happens to you. You have life. Tim Keller says this: the message of Christianity is instead things really are this bad about Christianity. Things really are this bad, and we can't heal or save ourselves. Things really are this dark. Nevertheless, there is hope. That's what it's saying. This world is dark. It's broken. We cannot save. We cannot help ourselves. Did you know the reason that we actually put up lights during the Christmas season is because Christians started it, because Christ is the light? And so, when you go to a place in Seoul with a big Christmas tree with all the lights, and you think it's so beautiful, it's only pointing to the great light. When you look into the night sky and you see the stars, not in Seoul, outside of Seoul, when you look into the night sky and you see the stars, you think, wow, it's so beautiful, because light is beautiful. And so, one practical application: light up your workplace, light up your home, make it beautiful, and let it always remind you Jesus is the true light. This place is beautiful because of the light here. That's what light does. That's it. So it started off in Germany as Christians would put candles onto the tree. they would melt the wax and they would put candles onto the tree, but only for a short bit because, wood, fire, not good. But that's what they would do. And from there, others started to use, when they had lights, could use lights to picture that. And that's why we do it, because Christ is the light. Another thing that we do in Christmas is our presents, right? Good thing, right? We love to receive presents, not give. We love to receive presents. I love to receive presents. You're welcome to give me presents. But as you give presents, there are some presents that are not what you want. Sometimes offensive. What if someone gave you a book? And Tim Keller makes this illustration. What if someone gave you a book and it says, the title is, you open it up and you read it and it says, Overcoming Selfishness. Gives it to you. It's like, here you go. How do you respond to that? Right? What if someone gives you a book and says, How to Be a Good Friend? Right? It's like, you should read this. How do you feel? Are you not a little bit offended? What if someone goes up to you and gives you nose hair clippers? How do you respond to that? Some of you'd be angry. But what if it's true? What if it's true? These gifts that we receive, sometimes we don't like them because sometimes there is truth. You know why we give presents? Because Jesus is the present. And we give to others. That's why we do it, actually. You know what Jesus is saying? What's he saying? You live in darkness, you are dark, you are blind. I am the light, let me come into the world. What it's saying, it's an offensive message. What it's saying is you are not loving, you are selfish, you are inconsiderate, you are broken. That's the message that Jesus is sending to us in this season. One practical application is then read the Word. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Word is His power. It's also His relationship. It's how He expresses, reveals Himself. And so one very practical application in this Christmas season is when you open up the Word and you read what you're saying, God, I am dark. God, I am foolish. God, I don't know everything. I need your word. You are my life. You are my light. I need you. That's what you're saying. When you're not reading it, you know what you're saying? God, I am actually okay. I don't need light. I'm fine. I'll figure it out. And in a couple of months, you'll stub your toe. Right? That's what's going to happen. That's what that present means. As you go through life, that's what you will see. In our lives, as we go through these moments, what you'll also find is that there's a different way to receive that light. You see, light enters into certain places only by the cracks that you see. Light only enters into certain caves by certain cracks that are there. God will only enter into your heart by the cracks in your heart. If you don't have cracks in your heart, you will always think, I'm good, Jesus. My life is fine. I've got to figure it out. But once you see that crack, you make a mistake, you do something stupid, you realize these cracks. What we try to do as men and women is we try to cover it up, bandage it up. It's not there. Why we polish it up, put makeup on it, right? So it's not there. And what it's saying is, open that crack up. Let the light enter in. Because it's only going to be through those cracks the light enters in. The different struggles that you have in your life, the different sins you have in your life, often we try to suppress it. I'm not that bad. No, what it's saying is that's actually the only place in your life you will see, that's how light enters in. Through those cracks in your life. Stop covering up the cracks. I should go to Jesus and say, this is who I am. This is my brokenness. And as you do that, that's how the crack will shed light into your heart. Let's humble ourselves in this Christmas season and acknowledge before God, you are the light. You are my life. I do not have things figured out. And though it is hard to read, and though I may not get everything out of it, what it's saying is it's an act of faith. God, you are my life. I trust in you. Please guide me. Let's pray.